coming up.
Does Mr. Clark prepare the food himself at his apartment, or is there a caterer or a hired chef that does that?
This may give the impression to Canadians that you're actually downsizing. And when Canadians think of the term downsizing, they think of perhaps raising a family, having an empty nest, and moving from a 4 to 5 bedroom home to a small 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom condo. But that's the furthest from the truth in relation to the acquisition of this property on Billionaires Row. In fact, the old property on Park Avenue was roughly 3,800 square feet, and you downsized, wait for it, to a whopping 3,600 square feet.
I also would like to clarify that...
No, that's fine. It's my time. You're going to provide all that information that I requested in writing. Thank you. My next question is...
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
The rationale for purchasing the $9 million condo for Justin Trudeau's buddy on Billionaire Row is predicated on not having a kitchen at the facility that Global Affairs Canada, under the Trudeau government, acquired in 2018. And now here we are in 2024, and we've got to buy a $9 million condo because someone, Global Affairs Canada, under Justin Trudeau, forgot to put a kitchen in.
Just before the break, you actually lied to committee. And you did it for partisan purposes. You did it so that Justin Trudeau and his buddy Tom Clark would look good.
Point of order. Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if there's correspondence.
Well, you pick up the phone and say, hey, by the way, we just purchased a $9 million condo on Billionaires Row. Is that what you did?
Okay.
Events, but there's also...
Sir, do you have the specific condo rules? Does somebody in the government of Canada have those specific condo rules? You understand how important this is, right? The whole justification for this luxury condo is we can host events. There are rules that govern the building in terms of what events can be hosted. So somebody in the government of Canada should have those rules and should be able to provide those.
Have a meeting space. We're told that we need this new $9 million residence for Tom Clark, Justin Trudeau's buddy on Billionaire Row, because the meeting space was insufficient. But the space that you have has hosted prime ministers, ambassadors, and all order of people. What's the added value for Canadians who can't pay their rent and for the 1 in 4 Canadians who are going to food banks?
As I mentioned with the real
I just want the question answered. I don't need an explanation.
Yeah.
Did you pay full listing or did you negotiate?
I've been in the public servant for 30 years.
for 30 years. So pretty much your entire adult life you've been in the federal public service serving this country. Is that correct, sir?
Give or take, yes, absolutely.
Sir, I wanted to say thank you for your service to this country.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Residence in New York City is more than just a place of residence. It is an essential venue for hosting key interlocutors in smaller, more personal settings.
Thank you very much. We'll start our 6-minute rounds with Mr. Barrett. Go ahead, please, sir.
So we're here today in the context in Canada of a cost of living crisis. We have 1 in 4 Canadians saying that they're going to be using food banks this fall. We know that rent prices have doubled, mortgage prices have doubled, and the Prime Minister's media buddy, who's making a very healthy salary by any measure compared to Canadian salaries, is getting a $9 million condo for his use as a residence. I know you said that its primary purpose was as a workspace, but if it's clocking on average about 2 business functions per month, and he's sleeping there 30 times per month, it sounds like its primary purpose is as a residence. Who signed off on the decision, sir? The most senior person who signed off? Just the name, please.
Mr. Chair, the transaction was signed by the Deputy Head of Mission based on a written delegation from the Director General responsible for real property planning and stewardship.
Who is the Director General?
The Director General is part of our real property team and who was supported by the governance and the process that was reviewed.
And the DG's name is?
And the DG's name is Frank Uzimbe.
And the deputy head of, and it was the Deputy Head of Mission who had the delegated authority, and who's the Deputy Head of Mission at the time?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to clarify that the mission actually are not part of the approval process or the decision making. the mission, the DHOM, was actually had the authority from headquarters, the DG, who had the authority to sign that transaction, which is understandable.
The name, sir?
Rob McCubbin.
Perfect.
Yeah.
In 2018, the Office of the Consul General and the Embassy to the United Nations moved into a joint workspace, which primary purpose is work, near Grand Central Station in New York City. So that facility has an executive dining room, if I understand correctly, and a reception space for up to 150 people. Is that correct? Just a yes or no, because I have a substantive question.
Mr. Chair, yes, the environment has an area that can accommodate. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the full kitchen that would be required, which would drive us to actually have quite expensive costs for actually providing the food by a caterer.
Okay, so does Mr. Clark prepare the food himself at his apartment, or is there a caterer or a hired chef that does that?
Mr. Chair, I'd be pleased to answer that question. I'll turn very quickly to the DG.
I think we know the answer is that there are third-party costs associated with the food preparation, irrespective of where it happens. My substantive question is, why is the executive space that was purpose-built in 2018 for use by the Consul General and use by Canada's ambassador to the United Nations not sufficient, and that we had to incur millions of dollars of extra expenses that are going to be financed through the taxes of Canadians who are struggling to survive in the form of a $9 million penthouse on Billionaires Row in New York City for Justin Trudeau's media buddy? Why couldn't we use the space that was purpose-built instead of getting this luxurious location that's primary purpose is just for Mr. Clark's lodgings?
Mr. Chair, I'll welcome this question where we can actually articulate the space requirement that we provide and the reason behind it. I'll turn very quickly to the ADM of real property that can articulate the need that are actually identified as we provide this kind of like space. So I'll turn to Mr. Robin Dubois that can articulate more details about it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As in opening remarks, we said the official residence is served as a place of living, but also as a platform for representation. We do have representation space at the consulate that is now amalgamated with the mission to the United Nations. We did that in 2018 to create savings and synergies. There is representational space in the office, but it doesn't allow for the kind of activities and representation that the official residence would. The new official residence has been acquired. It is smaller. It can accommodate smaller.
Thanks very much. We heard all of that information already. That was it took you a minute to not offer us any new information. We had previous representatives in the space. I think now Senator Pamela Wallin occupied the previous residence, identified it as sufficient. The $1.8 million estimate for renovations of the old residence suddenly became insufficient in 2023, which was right around the time that that Mr. Clark was the new head of mission, or the new consul general there. What happened that got the ball rolling there? Was it Mr. Clark that initiated the request? And if it was not Mr. Clark, who was it?
Mr. Chair, I welcome this question. I'd like to start by saying that there was no influence from Mr. Clark. He was not involved in the consultation or decision process.
Okay. So would you be able to table all correspondence on the subject of the new residence, or the transition to a discussion on a new residence instead of renovations?
Mr. Chair, as explained, we have a governance that's actually managed by headquarters, and we'd be pleased to actually table what the whole process is and how we got to the
correspondence, sir. You'll table the correspondence?
Mr. Chair, I can look at what's available and get back to you on that.
Well, if there was correspondence, you'll table it?
Yeah, I'll look into
Perfect.
it. Yeah.
Thank you.
My understanding is that aside from the cost imperative and looking at some of the needs, there were some new regulations were introduced by the board of the now previous property that restricted the ability of the mission to be able to perform the duties that they need to provide for us to make sure that we manage over $200 billion of trade in one of the most important cities, as you said it, which covers a lot. So can you talk about the imperative from the point of view that, aside from the cost, really we're dealt a hand that we had to react? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This allows us to actually articulate how much of a smart investment this was and how the process was sound following all the policy that and well documented as well. What I'll do is I'll turn to Robin that can articulate what were the main reason why we had to move and what had evolved in the last couple of years. Robin.
Thank you very much. It's a very good question. The imperative to move was based on several elements. The business case includes, as you mentioned, some restrictions that have been applied by the co-op board on the usage of the official residence. There was one element that was part of the decision. There was also the fact that the unit was aging, and we had received report in 2017 that in the early 2020s there would be a need to refurbish or renovate the apartment, and that's the $2.6 million cost that was reported. And there was also another element that that was reported in the business case, that was the since the introduction of the Accessible Canada Act in 2021, the apartment was not compliant with that act. So all of those elements led to a option analysis, and what we do in our investment management framework, we make sure that we look at the full life cycle analysis of all of the options. So in 2023, what happened is we launched this initiatives to look at what are the three options that are available to us and what would be the cost benefit of each of the three. The three elements would be renovate, put $2.6 million to renovate the actual unit, or replace it with a leased asset, or replace it with a Crown owned asset. And we really, when it all came down to cost at the end of the day, because we had the last option that was replaced to own was more beneficial, of course, in the long term. So the net present value was calculated on the three options, and we picked the third one, which became the favorite option because it was creating $7.4 million of savings over, putting $2.6 million in a renovation for a unit that was still not meeting all of our requirements.
My first question, probably to Mr. Cousineau, is whether in the decision-making process, the optics and the potential implications of buying a property on Billionaires Row at a time of historic wealth inequality, both in the United States and Canada, came up as a potential risk factor for global affairs.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. First, I'd like to say that we are looking at the heritage building that is in the Midtown district. As I said in my opening remark, this heritage building is an old building that was recently renovated. We are not in the skyscraper, which might have led to the branding that's being reported in the media. We're not in that building. Also, I'd like to reiterate that we have a process that actually looks at specific criteria to respond to the diplomatic needs, which are around location, security, and other criteria. I'd be pleased to turn to my colleague Robin, responsible for real property, who could articulate how we got to that decision of the 111 57th Street.
Thank you, Stéphane. Thanks for the question. What I will offer to the committee is that we have a set of guidelines and a real property manual that exists that has a chapter on how to select official residences. And that lays out basically what are the characteristics that we're looking, and also what kind of location that we would like to acquire. We pick that residence there. And as I said in my previous intervention, it's a place of work when we hold meetings, and it's also a place where the Consul General will live. So we have two sets of criteria that we need to apply here. It's criteria for a good location to be able to deliver the program that we have, the program being the representation functions that we need to exercise abroad. So we basically locate the official residences in location where contacts are accessible, where other like-minded countries are located, nearby our office as well for various reasons. And we have a set of criteria for the selection of the official residence for the living space. In this particular case, what happened is we looked with the real estate broker at 21 properties that are located in 7
If I could interrupt you, sir.
Yes, sir.
The original question, sometimes the original question gets lost a little bit in the explanation. The original question was whether the optics and the perception that might be associated with purchasing a property in an area colloquially known as Billionaires Row was ever discussed as a risk factor by Global Affairs during the purchase decision.
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. During the process, we applied all of the factors and basically found that place around in the 7 neighborhood that we visited and saw that it was considerably cheaper or less expensive to be located in Midtown, which is the location where we purchased. And the question of Billionaire Row did not surface at that time because we were looking at the characteristic, location, and functionality of the property.
Mrs. Block for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to start off my round of questioning with a couple of requests. Yesterday, in our deliberations with TBS and PSPC, I had asked for a list of the real property that GAC is the custodian for, and she advised me that I needed to put that request to you. So I'm asking if you could table that list of real property holdings with this committee.
Mr. Chair, it will be our pleasure to actually provide that list.
Thank you. As well, based on the information we received yesterday, could you table with the committee the life cycle costing for keeping the current residence and repairing it, and for the purchase of a new residence, including the sale of the current residence?
Mr. Chair, as explained, part of the process was looking at this option analysis and the financial implication for the 3 options. So we will be pleased to actually provide the analysis that was on. Yep.
Thank you very much. In your search for a new residence, and I'm probably following up on a similar line of questioning to the former member, in your search for a new residence, did you consider the purchase of a residence away from Manhattan in a more cost-effective neighborhood?
Mr. Chair, I welcome that question. There are criteria that we looked at, as mentioned, and as it was pointed out, New York is a very expensive market. I just wanted to refer to some example of other countries. UK, for example, 5 years ago, bought something that's valued today at $21 million. So it is an expensive market, whatever district that you're going to be looking at.
Right, but now, surely there are more cost-effective neighborhoods than, as my colleague referenced, Billionaire Row.
And this is bringing me back, Mr. Chair, to what are the actual criteria that we have to look when we actually establish the location and we do this analysis. I'll turn to Robin that can articulate what are those criteria and why is it important to be in the right location.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, the question is about the location on Manhattan, and that's the first thing we ask when we select a location or a property is its location to be able to deliver the program needs. And in this case, all of the G7 and G20 countries that have either an office or an official residence on Manhattan Island, and it made sense from a program perspective for proximity to be located on that in the same area. Now, the question about where in Manhattan, the 21 properties that we visited in 7 different neighborhoods, we picked the cheapest, or one of the cheapest on the list that was available per square meter, and that's the one that was located in Midtown that we acquired.
So perhaps you could provide for us a more detailed explanation of what program requirements dictated this need. You've mentioned the need to be co-located, but what other program requirements are taken into consideration in order to be located on the south end of Central Park in Manhattan?
Mr. Chair, I welcome again the question. We do have a framework that includes all these criteria that we're making allusion to. We have a manual that includes those criteria as well.
Can you table that?
And we could, Mr. Chair, we would be pleased to chair that manual that already exists.
So I guess my next question would be, do you believe that purchasing a residence in a more cost-effective area would have an impact on Canada-U.S. trade or diplomatic relations?
Mr. Chair, as mentioned in my opening remark, the investment that we've done was a long-term value with a net present of $7.4 million, and that's after doing the option analysis, looking at multiple properties, going for a space that had reduced and was offering a very cost-effective solution. So we believe that purchase was a very good investment for Canadians.
So I guess my question was more along the lines of perhaps a comment that was out on a news broadcast where it was suggested that if Canada wanted to play in the big leagues, we needed to spend money. Do you think that if we don't spend this kind of money, we won't be taken seriously by the United States?
Very brief answer, please.
Mr. Chair, as the stewardship responsible for the infrastructure around the globe, our main goal is to ensure stewardship and value for money. So we're looking always at that aspect.
And just for anyone who might be curious, was the Consul General, Tom Clark, involved in the decision of purchasing a new official residence?
Mr. Chair, welcome the question. As mentioned, this was a smart acquisition. This was actually a process that was sound, policy compliant, well documented, and exempt from any influence, including from Mr. Clark. Thank you.
Thank you. And how many years do you expect the residence to serve the current Consul General, or the office itself, actually?
Mr. Chair, I'll turn to Robin just to ensure to have the right number of years.
Well, the investment is done on the very long term. I mean, the last official residence, we've owned it since 1961, and this one, there's no indication that we're going to be disposing of it anytime soon. So I would say it's going to serve for its lifetime, which is estimated to between 55 and 60 years.
Could you talk a little bit about how Canada compares to other G7 countries in terms of consular properties in New York? Where do we stack up amongst that group of countries with regard specifically to the value and location of real estate?
A brief answer, please.
Mr. Chair, welcome the question. I've shared one example, which was UK, where they bought something like 5 years ago, actually had hit the media at $21.5 million. We've looked at a couple of other countries also to compare. I would say that we're one of the lowest one, if it's not the lowest cost of purchase when we compare it to, relatively to other countries. I have New Zealand at $11 million 11 years ago, so you can imagine the cost today. $35 million for Italy. Even Danish, that's not G7, at $9 million. Thank you.
Sir. Mr. Brock, please, for 5 minutes.
The acquisition of this extravagant condo on Billionaires Row has garnered a lot of attention across this country, as well as with media. I'm curious as to the consultations that the four of you have had prior to today's appearance with Minister Joly.
Mr. Chair, we have followed the governance and process according to our delegation.
It's not the question, sir. It's not the question. I have limited time. I'm interested in your discussions with Minister Joly in relation to your appearance. Did it happen?
Mr. Chair, no, there was no interaction with Mr.
Did you receive any emails from Minister Joly with respect to your appearance?
Mr. Chair, no, we haven't received any emails.
Has she weighed in on the controversy surrounding the acquisition of this property?
Mr. Chair, the minister was not involved in this
Thank you.
process.
Was she briefed by you?
Mr. Chair, we actually have brief, as per normal process, the minister's
Was she
office.
briefed on the acquisition of this property?
Mr. Chair, she was informed, the Chief of Staff was informed in June 2024.
I'm going to push back on some of the narrative that has been circulated among Canadians. Your department is quoted as follows: considering the high renovation costs for the current residents and value of the property, GAC has recommended a relocation to a new, smaller, more suitable, and more economical apartment. In addition to representing a savings opportunity of more than $2 million, it will also reduce ongoing maintenance costs, property taxes, support future program needs, and meet representational requirements. Now, at first blush, this may give the impression to Canadians that you're actually downsizing. And when Canadians think of the term downsizing, they think of perhaps raising a family, having an empty nest, and moving from a 4 to 5 bedroom home to a small 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom condo. But that's the furthest from the truth in relation to the acquisition of this property on Billionaires Row. In fact, the old property on Park Avenue was roughly 3,800 square feet, and you downsized, wait for it, to a whopping 3,600 square feet. The actual rooms have actually increased. The old property had 12 rooms. The new property has 14 rooms. So you're not giving the Canadians the full truth here. You're not being honest with them in terms of the actual blueprint. Now, I also want to talk about the operating costs. You keep talking about these savings. We're saving Canadians upwards to $115,000 per year. I've got the listings from both of these properties from a website called Street Easy. The old monthly maintenance cost, this is the common fees, this would be the taxes, is $13,147 US per month. The new property is not a savings at all. Taxes and common charges are actually $15,213. So $2,000 US per month more for this new property that's supposed to be saving Canadians value. You're misrepresenting the facts. You're not telling the truth to Canadians. So I want you to be aware of this, and I want you to comment on it, because you talk in broad strokes about these savings. When you dig down into this, there's no savings at all. Now let's talk about the utility costs. What currently are the utility costs on Park Avenue versus utility costs on 57th Street? Is there a savings?
Mr. Chair, welcome the question to clarify the costs. I will turn to my colleague.
I didn't need that, sir. That's a waste of time. If anyone knows the answer, please, Mr. Dubois, answer the question.
I don't have the cost of the utilities at the new place. We have not occupied it yet. But I have the total amount that is forecasted to spend on the ongoing basis per month.
Okay, and is that a savings over Park Avenue, or is it the same, or is it more?
It's a saving.
Savings.
Yes.
You'll table that for us?
We could.
You'll table the monthly utility costs for Park Avenue and the monthly utility costs for West 57th. Okay? Now, what else about the
Sorry, Mr. Brock, that is our time.
Thank you.
Mr. Baines, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our guests for joining us today. Has the GACA dealt with any cases similar to this case where residence or other real property was bought to replace one that was being sold?
Mr. Chair, we do have a lot of official residents around the globe. I don't in hundreds of projects. I will turn to Robin, who might have more specific information about that.
Good question. As my colleague, Mr. Cousineau, was explaining, we basically report in the Federal Real Property Directory that we have 2,300. We're the custodian of 2,300 properties, and we do transactions on a regular basis every year. We transact for staff quarters, for official residences.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Do you look at, and your criteria to ensure that these are located in the right areas? Like, how do you determine which areas? I know that it's a lengthy analysis that you do, but typically one of the key pieces is that it should be located in areas where diplomatic relations occur, correct?
And the requirements change depending if it's residential for staff quarters, official residences for representation purposes, or chanceries that are office space. But we basically look at a set of criteria as you described there to select those locations.
And how many did you say there were? You said over 1,000?
Oh, we have 2,300 assets abroad.
In how many different countries?
If I might intervene. So we have 182 mission in 112 countries, Mr. Chair.
Following Mr. Brock's line of questioning, just to put a fine point on it, can you please provide to this committee in writing a detailed breakdown of monthly costs associated with both locations and all costs, any taxes, any condo fees, any co-op fees, utilities, a clear breakdown for both locations, all the information you have. You'll be able to provide that to the committee within the usual timeline?
Mr. Chair, as already mentioned, we can provide the option analysis, which actually include the net present value, that it should be including all that information. I also would like to clarify that...
No, that's fine. It's my time. You're going to provide all that information that I requested in writing. Thank you. My next question is...
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I thought there was a statement that was going to clarify what Mr. Genis was asking, and I would like to hear it.
Well,
you can. I'm sorry. I'll address this, Mr. Longfield. You can hear it during your time, but this is Mr. Genis' time, please. Thank you.
People who have been here for a long time have complete ignorance of the rules. Chair, how much time do I have left?
4 minutes.
Thank you.
Point of order. I don't appreciate the comment that Mr. Genis just made to an honorable member.
Okay, excuse me.
Nonsense.
I'll take care. Mr. Longfield, that's not a point of order. Appreciate it, but we understand the sentiment. Mr. Genis, continue with your time, please.
Thank you. Just to the witnesses, I do want to say I think it's pretty disingenuous to project cost savings based on a comparison of purchase price in one case with asking price in another. That's clearly an apples to orange comparison. Maybe more precisely, an apples to magic apples comparison. You've set an asking price for the old property at 550 Park Avenue, but that asking price is not the same as the appraised value. We heard that yesterday. My research team looked at other properties being sold at 550 Park Avenue. All of them have sold substantially below asking price if they were sold at all. In many cases, they were sold at reduced price. There was a reduced price, and then they were taken off the market and not sold. And just for your reference, we looked at units number 10, 2W, 17E, 11W, 12A, 16AE, and 6W, all cases where they were reduced in price and not sold, or they sold at a substantially reduced price below the asking price. So your fake math of asking price comparison to the purchase price is pretty thin. If you wanted to show that this was a good transaction, if you wanted to show that there were savings, I'd like to know why in the world didn't you just sell the existing property first before purchasing the new property? That would have given you a sense of what your actual comparison was in terms of numbers. Why did you wait to even list the old property until you purchased the new one?
Chair, I welcome the question. Let's remember that the residence is a place of work. So it's not just like a pure residence. So we actually needed business continuity. If we would have sold the actual residence, we would have actually have to lease another location so we ensure business continuity, which is why we didn't do that.
Sir, you have multiple different locations where you can hold events. So for an interim period of a few months, you could have used many other spaces in New York, the consulate itself, space that's available to the UN ambassador. You could have hosted other events in other locations. In fact, most of the hospitality expenses for Mr. Clark involve restaurants. You are frequently hosting events in restaurants. So that excuse isn't going to fool anyone either, sir. Why could you not at least secure a buyer for the old location before moving to the new location instead of coming to committee with this fake comparison of apples and oranges?
Mr. Chair, I will go back to the criteria that we've talked about when we select a location. It's about not only location, but security.
The question is, why didn't you sell first?
And business continuity to ensure also that it met the criteria for the location.
But there are so many other locations in New York where you could have events. Another question in the same vein. Is your analysis of numbers predicated on Park Avenue property selling within a certain time frame? You told us about certain potential alleged savings. Is that predicated on it selling within a certain time frame?
Mr. Chair, welcome. The question, this saving that we have presented in our net present value is not tied to a specific sale of the current condo. Thank you.
Well, that doesn't make any sense then, because you have ongoing carrying costs associated with both properties for as long as you own them. Now, in the context of selling one property and purchasing another in New York, the Government of Canada may have had to pay, but may have been exempt from the following: capital gains tax, the U.S. Foreign Investment and Real Property Tax Act, state and city transfer taxes, New York's mansion tax. Which of these taxes or costs did you have to pay, and which, if any, were you exempt from?
I'm afraid time has not been left for an answer, so we'll get back to it again, or perhaps you can commit to put that in writing to us.
What's a normal time for a Consul General to occupy one of the residences that their government provides?
Mr. Chair, I welcome the question. I will actually turn to my colleague, DG of North America, Mark Hillen, that can talk about these operations.
We've recently established set timeframes for diplomatic postings, and in the United States, it is 4 years.
Terrific. So, I mean, part of the arguments that the Conservatives is making is that this is a house that the Prime Minister is giving one of his buddies, one that was also a moderator at the Conservative Leadership Convention, which kind of disconnects. Is any staff involved, including the acting government lead at the consular office, is any staff involved in the selection of properties?
Mr. Chair, once again, I welcome the question. The process, the decision-making is all managed at HQ, and there's no influence by any other staff than the people responsible for the stewardship of the real property.
We've heard in previous testimony that Steinway Hall, which I believe is the heritage building that the new apartment is located in, is somewhat different from Steinway Tower. However, they're connected and associated. And I guess my first question is whether they share the same residential address.
Mr. Chair, the answer is simple. Yeah, actually, the annex, which is the skyscraper, was the new annex that was added later on, and it is the same address.
So Steinway Tower, Mr. Cousineau, has been a somewhat controversial building. I was reading in one report that according to the Manhattan District Attorney, the construction company that built Steinway Tower, Parkside Construction, and its affiliates stole more than $1.7 million in wages over 3 years from about 520 workers at the tower and 7 other high-rise buildings. And the company also hid nearly $42 million in wages from state insurance officials to avoid paying millions in workers' compensation premiums. Was Global Affairs aware of this controversy during the evaluation process? And was the controversy around the construction of Steinway Tower considered as a risk factor when it came to the perception and brand image that would come with locating global affairs operations at that address?
Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the question. Once again, as pointed out, there is the Steinway Tower and there is the Steinway Hall. So we're not staying in that Steiner Tower, sorry. Personally, I was not aware of this information.
Okay, so I can assume that it didn't, like it feels like a little bit of a, splitting hairs to distinguish between the tower and the hall, given that they're connected and they share the same residential address. I guess the question is whether it came up during discussions as a potential risk factor, particularly the message that it sends to working people that Global Affairs was willing to locate in a building with such a controversial history. And I take from your comments that didn't come up in the discussions around the purchase.
Brief answer, please.
Mr. Chair, again, our focus is on stewardship and value for money. We've looked at the Steinway Hall, and I couldn't speak about that information is being shared today. I was not aware.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barrett, please.
About the purchase before or after?
Mr. Chair, welcome to the question. The Minister's office was actually informed before the purchase.
Okay. And who in the Minister's office was informed?
Mr. Chair, following the delegation authority, we actually communicated as per normal protocol, and we've informed the Minister's office, more precisely the Chief of Staff.
Okay. On what date was the Minister's Chief of Staff informed, and on what date was the sale finalized?
Mr. Chair, I'd have to go back to the chronology, but if my memory plays well, for the actual purchase, we've informed if you bear with me, the intent to purchase and sell in early June 2024.
That's when you informed the Minister?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the total cost, just the number, to make any fit-ups for the new residence?
Mr. Chair, in terms of fit-up costs, we don't have the precise detail financial information, but what I could say, it's probably around $100,000 to $150,000.
$150,000.
Yeah.
The shared space with the UN Embassy, how much was spent on that in 2018? I referenced it earlier, the meeting space.
Mr. Chair, I wouldn't have that information out of my hand, but I would be pleased to provide that information back to the
So that was in 2018 that space was acquired. And is it rented or owned?
Mr. Chair, I will turn to my colleague, Mr. Dubois.
Mr. Dubois, rented or owned?
I would have to confirm.
Okay.
I don't have the information.
You don't know. It seems relevant to this because the rationale for purchasing the $9 million condo for Justin Trudeau's buddy on Billionaire Row is predicated on not having a kitchen at the facility that Global Affairs Canada, under the Trudeau government, acquired in 2018. And now here we are in 2024, and we've got to buy a $9 million condo because someone, Global Affairs Canada, under Justin Trudeau, forgot to put a kitchen in. And I'm looking at the kitchen on the listing for the $9 million condo, and I'm quite curious about the square footage of this because it doesn't look like a commercial kitchen. And I'm just curious, yes or no, is it your contention that all food prep for events hosted at the official residence will be done on-site and not in a commercial kitchen? On-site or commercial kitchen?
Je ne peux pas répondre à cette question par oui ou par non. Mais est-ce que la préparation de nourriture se fera sur les lieux ou dans une cuisine commerciale? Le chef de mission pourra prendre une décision là-dessus. Oui, j'aimerais interrompre très brièvement.
Yeah, I'm on English channel and French is coming all of a sudden.
It should be back now.
Okay. Can we just test this? Is it working now? Got just over 2 minutes, Mr. Barrett.
The head of mission can decide. It seems foolish then to buy a $9 million condo because it has a kitchen that can accommodate these functions. That the office that you acquired in 2018, apparently you forgot to include a kitchen, and but he still might have a commercial kitchen prepare the food and hosts any number of events at restaurants. Could you table for the committee, please, Mr. Cousineau, the number of functions that Mr. Clark has expensed at restaurants since his time as CG? Can you table that for the committee?
Mr. Chair, I can certainly look at the information that's available in that context and provide it to the table.
Okay, that's great. How many official functions has Ambassador Ray hosted at his residence?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to actually turn to Mark Allen, responsible for the operation.
Mr. Allen, just the number, please. How many events?
I'm afraid I don't have the number for Mr. Ray.
Can you table it with the committee, please?
We certainly will.
This is it's pretty remarkable. Mr. Allen, I want to ask you a quick question. Is it your contention that had those meetings that occurred at the official residence with Mr. Clark, had they happened at the office of the Consul General and not in his residence, that Canada would not have succeeded in those trade negotiations or in those acquisitions? Is that what your statement is?
I can't speak about those specific events. I think the intimacy and the personal nature of an official residence for a head of a Canadian mission does add to their general toolkit.
Right. So if that was the case, wouldn't it make sense then in 2018 to have acquired a joint space that achieved that for both the UN, our UN rep, and for the CG instead of buying separate facilities for that purpose?
Again, I think having multiple options for different types of event is very important.
When you're playing with other people's money, I guess you can have as many options as you need.
You're going to actually be able to host meetings at this new apartment, and you host about 50 meetings per year, and you're going to be able to host that as this new apartment, which you were not able to do at the old apartment. Is that correct?
Chair, this is correct.
Okay, so what we have here is we have a better apartment, we have an upgraded apartment, we have more functionality, it is cheaper, and it saves Canadians' taxpayers. The conservative plan costs more, less accessible, less functionality, less effective, which basically describes the Conservative Party in a nutshell right there. And so this is, to me, this is incroyable. And I look at the fact in my community, so you're talking about $1 trillion trade partnership between Canada and the United States. 1/3, it's $1 trillion partnership. 1/3 of that trade goes through my community. So I care about making sure that we have the best Consul General, and we have the best folks in place, and we have the best resources in place. And the Conservatives are talking about downgrading the Canada-U.S. partnership and our ability to play hardball. And hardball is what we're doing, because it's $1 trillion investment. And I look at what the Liberal government has done to negotiate a NAFTA trade that was for our benefit, that helped our steel industry, that helped our auto industry. And you're darn right that we want to upgrade our resources there, not downgrade our resources, which is what the Conservatives have done. And it's exactly their playbook, what they did to the Canadian military as well when they were in government. They downgraded investment in our military. Now they want to downgrade investment in our most important trade relationship with our U.S. partnership. That's a shame. And so, again...
And that is our time, Mr. Kuzmirchuk.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Cousineau, just before the break, you actually lied to committee. And you did it for partisan purposes. You did it so that Justin Trudeau and his buddy Tom Clark would look good.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. We just had this
Your
conversation.
department...
It's not a point of order. It is a point of order.
Sorry, it's not. Can you continue, Mrs.
Yes.
Block?
Your department...
The language being used, Mr. Chair. The language is not respective of our witness.
You do not have the floor, Mr. Longfield. You've been an MP long enough to know that if you wish to interrupt, you call a point of order.
You've been an MP long enough to know what a point of order is.
And you should perhaps follow committee rules. And if you can continue like that, I will not recognize you, Mr. Longfield. But I take your point, but that is not a valid point of order. Please allow Mrs. Block to continue, and I'm sure she'll get to her point.
Rarely do I cut to the chase, as I just have done. But your department sent this committee a letter which stated that 50 events were held at the Consul General's residence over the past 2 years, not 50 events in 1 year. So that's 2 events, that's 1 event every 2 weeks. As a result of the information that you've given us, I would like for you to table with this committee a list of those events, together with the purpose of the events, the number of attendees, and now, because of this contrary information that you've provided for us today, I would like the dates of all those events included.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to clarify what's in the opening remarks that was provided was indeed 2 years. I might have misunderstood during the fast pace talking that was going on what was mentioned. So it is truly 2 years. And I'd like to add that as public service, we're here to represent the great work that we're doing. And I take exception on when we're being accused of being liars. We're there to be there for value for money and to do good stewardship and to provide Canadians what's best for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cousineau. I accept your explanation that you were caught off guard like the rest of us were in the midst of the rant prior to the break. Mr. Irek also accused the Conservatives of wanting to downsize, when in fact this is the argument that yourself and the officials have made as one of the reasons for why this is such an acceptable place for the Consul General to be moving to. So which is it? What's the official government line? Is it because it's a smaller residence and you want to downsize that you're pursuing this residence, or is it something else?
Mr. Chair, point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Kuzmierczuk.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, it's not a point of order. He's not making a point of order.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
That's not a point of order.
The word is downgrade.
Colleagues, please, one person at a time. Allow Mr. Kuzmierczuk to do his point of order, then I will decide. Could you just start again, Mr. Kuzmierczuk?
Yes. Respectfully, Mr. Chair, I used the word downgrade, that the Conservatives...
That is not a point of order. We will continue. Go ahead, Mrs. Block.
So can you just reiterate for us, is in fact one of the reasons that this is a more acceptable location that you have made is that it's a smaller residence than the one that the Consul General is currently residing in?
Chair, I'm going to go back to my opening remarks. We actually have made decision on multiple factors. One of them is the net present value that it was bringing. The second one was around like the meeting all the future needs, value for money for Canadians. And while we are downsizing, it was not the main factor.
All right, thank you very much. In the letter that we received from Ms. McCardle, she also cited that there were other issues raised about the suitability of the current residence. These issues included lack of proper division of family and representational spaces and restrictions on events that were imposed by the cooperative board. What are the rules for the new condo? Did you ensure that you would be allowed to bring in large groups of strangers for events at this exclusive condo building?
Mr. Chair, I welcome the question. As you can imagine, with the co-op model that exists, there was a lot of restriction that we had to face, which was very challenges. We do know that in the new location that we're going to go, there's going to be more flexibility, making us more agile for those representation.
So did you confirm if there were any rules in regards to the types of events that you hope to hold in the new residence?
Mr. Chair, I would respond to the current situation with the co-op and the restriction that we have, which would not be applied like the way it is with the current co-op environment we're in the new condo. So we are expecting more flexibility for sure.
Are there any rules that you are aware of?
Mr. Chair, I would actually turn to my colleague who have been working very closely on the purchase of the condo about the specific rules because I don't have those details.
And who would that be?
Thank you. Oh, that would be me. Thank you. we have taken into account the ability to perform the duties or the requirements of the program before purchasing the unit. I haven't read myself the condominium convention that exists at the building there, but I know that the unit was selected because it is possible and convenient to organize the events according to the program need.
It might state in that convention.
I'm not aware of any restriction that may exist in the new condo with regard to, typically there will be restrictions in terms of security and access, but other than that, I'm not aware of any other restriction.
Thank you.
It is fair to ask tough questions. It is fair to ask clarifying questions. It is fair to challenge the premises of the decision that was made by officials. But I strongly recommend for us to ensure that we carry the true meaning of what it means to be an MP, a member of parliament who represent Canadians, and stop labeling our officials who are working hard. And these officials may be working with other parties, hopefully not for a long time, but these officials need the respect because they are working very hard to represent Canada and Canada's interest. Thank you. So on Canada's interest, I want to go to, I believe, Mr. Mark Allen. Before I talked about the frame, I frame our conversation, three themes, imperative, I think we got it. I think our closing of the last round was around policies that were followed, values that were value for money. A lot of documents are going to come. We're going to have the opportunity to look at those calculation, valuation, and decide whether it is. But I really want to talk about the third theme, which was the importance. We've talked about the number of times, and we've gone to an angle that says, hey, look, you know what? Probably we could have done serving it out of somewhere else. Now, can you give me a sense of how big this mission is from a point of dollar value for trade? We're debating whether it's 2 meetings or whether it's 1 meeting per every 2 weeks. But how important are these? I hear $200 billion. I hear representing 6 or 7 jurisdictions. Can you break it down for us how important the work that we're doing in this area is?
Yes, this is one of 12 consulates general in the United States. This has a territory of 5 states: New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Delaware, and Pennsylvania. And the $200 billion is the two-way trade between Canada and the entire consular territory. It's a very influential part of the United States, the Eastern Seaboard. We mentioned it's the economic capital of the United States and a center for global financial markets. So the GDP of that entire area is $6 trillion. And as we say, the two-way trade between Canada and the territory is in the neighborhood of $200 billion.
I'm curious about accessibility, and it was mentioned as one of the justifications for the purchase of the new property that the old property didn't meet the requirements of the Accessible Canada Act. My question is whether the new property meets those requirements, specifically what the shortcomings at the old property were, and if the new property doesn't meet the requirements of the Accessible Canada Act, what the estimate is to ensure that the new property is brought up to spec and meets the requirements of the Act.
This is an excellent question, and indeed the current residence doesn't meet the Accessibility Act. I will turn to my colleague, Robin Dubois, that can speak about the new residence and information about accessibility.
You have a question, and you have several questions. One is about the shortcoming of the existing official residence, and there were 2 categories of shortcomings that were identified in that residence. One of them was associated with the unit per se. If I want to be more accurate, is the accessible bathroom were not available in the unit, and I know that there were also base building conditions that prevented full accessibility. So there are those issues are not found in the same way in the new residence, and now we can say that this new residence that we acquired is accessible.
Does the new residence meet the requirements of the Accessible Canada Act, since the Act was referenced in terms of the shortcomings of the old residence?
That's my understanding.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I want to circle back on Minister Melanie Joly's involvement in this latest Justin Trudeau scandal. We heard through you, Mr. Cousineau, that you notified her chief of staff sometime in June. You're going to give us the exact date. What I didn't hear is the actual date of the closing of the new unit. Presumably, real estate closes at the end of the month. Is it safe to say this occurred at the end of June of 2024?
Mr. Chair, if you bear with me, I'm just want to make sure that I have the information right in front of my eyes. The transaction approval, the payment and the transaction was towards the end of June 2024. Yeah.
But Melanie Joly's office was notified much earlier than the actual sale, correct?
Mr. Chair, as part of our process and communication, yes, we had communicated at the end.
And to your knowledge, you only communicated with the Chief of Staff. I'd like you to table the correspondence that you sent to the Chief of Staff. Will you do that, sir?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if there's correspondence.
Well, you pick up the phone and say, hey, by the way, we just purchased a $9 million condo on Billionaires Row. Is that what you did?
Mr. Chair,
surely
again,
there must be something that's official.
Mr. Chair, I want to reiterate, we follow our delegation authority, supported by expertise and a team.
How did you communicate, sir? It's a simple question.
Our team actually has been communicated with the Minister's office.
How did you communicate? Snail mail, email, telephone call? What did you do?
Mr. Chair, I could confirm and verify how the communication was done with their
Fine. It's absolutely ridiculous that you can't tell me how you communicate with your own ministry. That's absolutely ludicrous. Now, I think Canadians want to know why there's been such a deafening silence from the minister herself, knowing that we've got a housing crisis, an affordability crisis, 9 years of Justin Trudeau's spendthrift and irresponsible government, and crickets from the minister with respect to a $9 million condo for Justin Trudeau's buddy, who once asked him, what kind of shampoo do you use? As ridiculous as it, look, why hasn't she communicated to the public about this particular purchase?
Mr. Chair, we follow delegation authority, and I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of the minister. I think that question should be more appropriate for the minister herself. Thank you.
Okay. Let's talk about the property itself. It's listed. An elegant entry foyer with white Makuba stone floors, stunning powder room finished in jewel onyx, custom smoke gray floors, an Italian white Venato marble in one of the bathrooms, a freestanding copper soaking tub handcrafted by William Holland, custom bronze fixtures by Mr. Gurin. We talk about a kitchen equipped with a wet bar, Cristallo gold quartz-right countertops, custom handcrafted cabinetry, a full suite of Gaggenau appliances. Gaggenau, the most expensive appliance maker in the world, an oven, a Gaggenau oven costs $19,000. So I guess shopping at our local Leon's or the Brick wasn't an option for the Canadian taxpayers. But, I'm wondering why you had to have all of these features. I'm referencing your statement. When you talk about the old unit, last refurbished in '82, the apartment does not meet new building codes nor standards. So what I just described to you as luxurious pieces, are these GAC standards, or more frankly, are they Tom Clark's standards? Can you answer that question, sir?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just reiterate Mr. Clark didn't have any influence in the selection and approval of this new condo. The feature that we just described are not part of our what I would call space requirements. And that, we don't look at that kind of feature. We look at the value of the property, and we felt that the value proposition and the value for money was there for Canadians.
Well, the oven is $19,000. The refrigerator is $13,000. The coffee maker is $4,600. The freezer is $11,000. The dishwasher is $6,000. How on earth is that value for the Canadian taxpayer?
Mr. Chair, once again...
Just a very brief answer, please.
Once again, Mr. Chair, that's not part of the space requirements that we do when we do the actual evaluation of a new property, and I'll leave it at that.
I really take offense to the characterization of anyone who's come before us today as not being as truthful as they possibly can. And I just think we need to be really careful, again, at how we conduct our meetings. It's been a bit of a trend here, unfortunately, that our public servants have kind of been raked over the coals. And as we know in the past, this has actually led to threats being made against them or, social media campaigns. And so I really would caution all of us to be careful that this doesn't happen again. So I do have a question. Mr. Cousineau, you mentioned about the consul serving 300,000 Canadians in the area. What kind of services do citizens actually receive at the residence?
Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the question. It's an excellent one. I can tell you that consul is one of our busiest missions that we have in the world. And I'll turn to my dear colleague, Mark Aylan, to respond on the operation.
Yeah, with respect to services that the consulate provides directly to citizens, the committee will be aware of a number of incidents that have happened in New York's territory over the last year. There was a tour bus that crashed in upstate New York involving Canadians. A plane went down. People will remember the explosion at the Rainbow Bridge. Last November. And when these things happen, it's very important that the consulate has very close ties with local authorities. And in this case, with the governor's office, for example, with respect to the explosion at the Rainbow Bridge. And those ties are as I said earlier, maintained and advanced through the work of the consulate, which includes events at the official residence.
I think one thing that's come clearly through the Liberal line here is that they believe that investing in Canada means investing in luxury for a few well-connected officials. This underlines that Liberals can't tell the difference between investing in Canada and investing in themselves. And this was very clear in Mr. Kuzmerichuk's comments. Of course, Conservatives recognize the importance of our presence in New York. We also recognize the cost of living crisis and that events can be held in various places. We don't need an infinite number of possible places to host events. And I want to drill down into this, the government's argument here that this is fundamentally about hosting. So the government of Canada purchased a glitzy $9 million residence on Billionaires Row with all kinds of incredibly luxurious features. That it's much nicer than the kind of property that most Canadians or most New Yorkers would have. And the claim that the government's made is, well, this allows them to host events. Ironically, though, this glitzier property, much nicer place for the occupant, but has
just a point of order, Chair.
Less hosting space.
All right, let me interrupt you. That's a point of order, Mr. Genuis.
I'm just wondering if you could just check through the clerk if we're having any challenges with our interpretation. I'm hearing
it okay. I'm hearing the French okay. Are you interpreter? Can you hear Mr. Genuis okay? Yep,
okay.
We're fine.
Perfect. I apologize for the interruption.
Sorry, Mr. Genuis. Go ahead.
No problem. So, in terms of potential hosting in this new location, do you have a copy of the condo rules associated with hosting events in the new location?
Mr. Chair, once again, when it comes to the new location that we have purchased, it is more efficient and cost effective, as we said.
That's not
in terms of
my question, sir. Do you have the condo rules?
Mr. Chair, in terms of the condo and the condo rules, we would get. I would have to get back to you. I don't have that information with me right now.
Okay, sir. The primary justification you've used is that you want to be hosting events in the new location. You think it's more appropriate for hosting them. There are rules associated with hosting events. You must surely know what those rules are in order to make the case that this is a more appropriate or preferential location in some way, or that you can host events at all in the new location. And yet you don't know what those rules are. Is that correct?
We're actually purchasing as a more suitable and private setting for high-level things that it was mentioned.
Sir,
when it comes to
condo rules.
Yeah, when it comes to rules, I will turn to my colleague, Mr. Dubois, that can speak to the details of those rules.
Does anybody have the condo rules?
Thank you for the question. Yes, somebody has the condo rules, but I don't have them with me. I know that there are two options for the head of mission there in that building. It's basically he can use his own unit to entertain for smaller, more personal events. But there's also...
Sir, do you have the specific condo rules? Does somebody in the government of Canada have those specific condo rules? You understand how important this is, right? The whole justification for this luxury condo is we can host events. There are rules that govern the building in terms of what events can be hosted. So somebody in the government of Canada should have those rules and should be able to provide those quickly to this committee. Can you undertake to ensure that we are able to see those rules within, say, 48 hours?
I would, I'm totally, I know those rules exist and I know somebody has it. I can undertake to go back and find them. I would rather have a longer period of time to deliver if the chair agrees with me.
Okay, well, we need to have them prior to next week's meeting with Mr. Clark. So will you get them to us by Monday at noon?
Yeah, I can come back and inquire and see if I can get them to the committee by Monday.
By Monday at noon, they'll need to be translated as well.
I'm sorry, was that on? Did you mention the translation? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I assume the existing. Oh yeah. I assume this is part of my time.
Would you maybe advise the clerk end of the day or tomorrow morning about an update on when you'll be able to provide those rules to us, and then we'll get back to the committee then.
Thank you for the flexibility, Mr. Chair, because the document must be only in one official language.
Oh, I know, but just get back to the clerk today or us tomorrow or the clerk tomorrow morning about how long or when you'll be able to deliver that to us so we can get it translated.
Thank you.
You've got a short bit of time left, Mr. Genos.
Yeah. Just a follow-up question on that. Can those existing rules be changed by a simple majority of people in the building? How can those rules be changed? And what are the chances that the hosting rules would change once we've moved in?
Well, there's always an annual meeting with the building condo owner, and the rules can certainly be amended. But
so you don't know the rules, and the rules, even if they are more favorable, they can be changed by a vote of those in the building. So the whole justification for this luxury condo is hosting events. And you can't tell me the rules for hosting events, and those rules are subject to change by a vote of those in the building, and allegedly, so many of our potential investments depend on the ability to hold events in the private home of the Consul General. Like, do you see the obvious absurdity of this, sir? How your lack of knowledge of those rules doesn't square with the claims that have been made today?
Great that I think Mr. Dubois has clearly explained that we know those rules, like that's part of what the team is looking at, and we will be pleased to get back to you in terms of when we could provide those rules. And I think the question was about can those rules be changed? Yes, they can be changed. That's typical in a condo, and they will have their annual meeting to look at that.
You don't have the rules to present to us today, so we'll look forward to looking at them in the future, I suppose.
Thanks, Mr. Genuis. We're going over back to the West Coast. Mr. Baines, go ahead, please.
New York City is not the easiest place to get around. So maybe you can speak to all of those, things that matter. We talked about the trillions that are at our stake here, and we need that money. We need that money to provide the services and supports that Canadians need on a regular basis here. The people that even are the most vulnerable. So maybe speak to the importance of the proximity of the location.
Sure. I'd be pleased to. As I think we've said earlier, there's an incredible concentration in New York City of people, of capital, of institutions. It's a very large city. It can be difficult to navigate, and so that centrality is, I think, incredibly important for us as well as our like-minded, who as I say, are also our economic competitors. When we organize events, one of the success factors is the uptake on attendance of how many people do we invite and how many people actually attend, and when events are central, when they're held at a residence, the ratio of uptake is higher among the people whose help we need to advance our interests. Thank you.
Okay, my question is for the Deputy Consul General, Mr. McCubing. You signed off on the purchase of this property on Billionaires Row for Justin Trudeau's media buddy, Tom Clark. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I was delegated authority from the Property Bureau and headquarters to provide the wet signature on the transaction.
Are you aware if in relation to this transaction and its approval and your subsequent signature, if there was any correspondence with the Prime Minister's office, the Privy Council office, or the Minister for Global Affairs office?
I'm not aware of any communication between any of those agencies.
Okay.
And our office.
So there was no. You weren't given any visibility on communications with the Minister's Chief of Staff in the form of a heads up on this?
No, I was not involved with that communication.
How did you know that you were to sign it?
I was provided an email with a delegated letter authorizing me to sign the contract.
And who was the email from?
It was from my colleagues in the Property Bureau, the Director General in charge of real property.
Okay. Was Mr. Clark informed of that a decision had been taken to pivot from a renovation to a property purchase?
Mr. Clark was aware that there was a process ongoing to find a new official residence.
Did Mr. Clark ever opine, or are you aware of him ever offering any opinion on the suitability of the residence that's to be disposed of?
Sorry, pardon me, Mr. Chair. Mr. Clark never opined to me about the disposal of the current residence. So,
and further to my question, did he ever speak about the suitability or his comfort at the the residence that's being sold?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Clark never shared with me his thoughts on the suitability of the current residence.
But you weren't. Are you aware of him expressing any opinion on it?
I am not personally aware of Mr. Clark having shared any opinion on the current residence.
And was he read in on any of the options for the now purchased residence, or during that process?
No, Mr. Clark was not aware of any of the options and was not part of the process to look at any of the options.
Are you familiar with the space that's shared by your office and the ambassador to the United Nations?
Yes, I'm familiar with the Chancery building and the shared space.
Is it your opinion that that's a suitable place to hold meetings with trade officials and dignitaries?
We have Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we've host many different types of meetings at the shared space at the Chancery.
What's the highest level of dignitary or the highest individual in the order of precedence who has been party to a meeting in that space?
We have had meetings with ministers, not part of the consulate work, but the Prime Minister has had meetings in this office.
Okay. Have you had any ambassadors there?
Not on the consulate general side, so I couldn't speak to that, but I understand on the United Nations side.
Are you aware in the shared space of there being any ambassadors participating in meetings there?
In the shared space, I understand that ambassadors on the United Nations side participate in meetings.
Yeah, so I just find it very interesting, about the value, and we're going to run short on time here, but I just really like to know about the added value that Canadians who are working who are working in Victoria by the Sea, Prince Edward Island, or in Victoria, British Columbia, or in Windsor or Toronto, or in Sudbury or Sault Ste. Marie, who are struggling to pay their bills. What added value do they get for this? When we have a meeting space, we're told that we need this new $9 million residence for Tom Clark, Justin Trudeau's buddy on Billionaire Row, because the meeting space was insufficient. But the space that you have has hosted prime ministers, ambassadors, and all order of people. What's the added value for Canadians who can't pay their rent and for the 1 in 4 Canadians who are going to food banks?
I'm afraid there's no time for a response. Mr. Longfield, we'll go over to you, please.
I mean, social media is what it is. I mean, email communications, even me attending not in person, creates a distance between me and the people that we're talking to. It's second best to face-to-face. I'm looking at Canada's exports of goods and services. Our exports increased 4.4% in June. Imports rose 1.8% in June. So our balance of trade did quite well in June, and I think we've shown over the past several months an increase in our exports to international partners. When I'm working with the small businesses in Guelph, last week I was at a wheelchair manufacturer in Guelph, and I said, have you considered our trade services and use Canada Business app so that you could get in touch with our trade services, because you could export these goods, not just serving our local and the Canadian community, but you've got world-class products here. So small businesses need those connections either through the Canada Business app, but the face-to-face that our offices can provide. Could you maybe comment on any of the face-to-face opportunities that you've witnessed at this office in New York?
Absolutely. So our trade commissioner service, who are based in our overseas platform, including in New York, are directly responsible for opening doors on behalf of Canadian exporters and providing critical market intelligence to help them really seal deals in economies all around the world, and including in New York. I also mentioned the investment attraction raison d'être.
I apologize, Mr. Allen, but I do not leave you much time to answer. But
thank you, Mr.
You're
Allen.
more than
Thank you,
welcome to perhaps finish it in writing to committee. I think it'd be appreciated. Finish up with Mr. Brock and then Mr. Kuzmierczuk.
Thank you. I have a number of odds and end questions, some loose ends based on what we've discussed over the last almost 3 hours. I want to clarify, very early on in the first hour, my colleague Mr. Barrett had asked for details and tabling of any and all correspondence in relation to the sale and the acquisition of both condos. I want to specifically ask for any, and I appreciate you said it a number of times, that Mr. Clark did not influence the decision to sell and the decision to purchase. But we still want any and all correspondence between Tom Clark and Global Affairs in relation to both properties. Will you table that, sir?
As mentioned, I will be pleased to look into it and see what's available and get back to this table.
Okay. Now, in relation to the 57th Street property, it was on the market for 235 days, just shy of 8 months. It sold for $6.63 million. Did you pay full listing price, or did you negotiate the price down to 6.63 US?
Mr. Chair, always looking for value for money. Once again, I will turn to Robin to talk about the process of the negotiation on this one, which has been done, as I mentioned, with the real
I just want the question answered. I don't need an explanation.
Yeah.
Did you pay full listing, or did you negotiate?
There was a negotiation that took place, and we paid less than the listed price.
How much less?
I think it's in the document that was shared with you, and it's 6.5 million US.
Right, but how much from the listing price to the selling price? What was the difference?
It was listed at, I don't remember exactly, but I think it was 6.89 million.
6.89, and you bought for 6.63.
6.5. 6.5 million we paid.
Okay, so
US.
roughly what, $300,000-$400,000?
Yes.
Okay. And with respect to the renovation costs on Park Avenue, how many bids did you receive from Global Affairs?
The renovation was assessed by our quantity surveyors, that are the professionals that basically assess the work that needs to be done based on plans done by architects. And we never went to market for those renovations because we worked with those numbers.
Why wouldn't you go to market to get the best value?
Is when we got the information that it was up now to 2.6 million, we wanted to change the approach and look at all of the options.
Well, that's based on your internal numbers, though. Why would you not go market to see whether or not it would be a more feasible option by trying to find the best renovation cost possible? Again, to save the taxpayer further money. Why wasn't that an option?
Well, the quantity surveyor are very good at assessing the cost of a project. So when we saw that the costs were escalating,
is that what you do for all your official residences in terms of renovation costs?
We do.
You don't look for best value.
We look for best value. We use quantity surveyors first to get an appreciation of how much money it's going to cost.
Let's move on. You talked about that it was not, the old property was not accessible. Can you explain, and I think you did, that one of the washrooms had to be accessible? I truly understand that. Those are Canadian codes. But what was done specifically with the new property to make that accessible?
Well, I understand that the floor plan was looked at, and then it was determined that the options exist there for an accessible bathroom to be.
Okay, and that's being installed as we speak, because Mr. Clark is not in that residence right now, correct?
No, he's not there, and I don't think we need to renovate. I think that the bathroom is readily available and accessible as it is.
Okay, so you don't need to put any additional devices on the walls to make it even more accessible. It's just the ability to use a wheelchair to get into the washroom. Is that what you mean by accessible?
Yes.
The width of the door was more accessible at the new location versus the old location?
Yes,
and you couldn't renovate the existing entranceway to a washroom. There was like 7 washrooms in the old location. You couldn't just tear out the door and make it accessible. Was that discussed?
Sorry, we're talking about the
old property, Park Avenue.
Well, that was part of the renovation projects that we looked at. It was to make it accessible.
Okay. You also mentioned that, and I had asked you questions about property taxes, monthly property taxes, and I explained to you that you are lying to Canadians when you say the new property has less carrying costs than the old, and I pointed that out to you. But then I also heard, in reference to a Liberal colleague asking you questions, that you are tax exempt pursuant to the Vienna Convention. Can you explain that, please?
We're out of time, but can you provide a very brief answer?
Absolutely, and very quickly, the new property is definitely cheaper because of that. We will be tax exempt on the new condo because of that Vienna Convention. Absolutely.
Chair, just a quick point of order.
Yeah, hold on one moment, Mr. Kusmirchuk. Yes, Mr. Genos?
Thank you, Chair. Just I want to at the end of my first round, I asked a number of specific questions, which you said the witness can follow up on in writing. I don't know that that was clarified, but I did just want to clarify, since we're towards the end here, that I would like a response in writing to my questions regarding various transfer taxes, mansion tax, etc., whether they apply and what the amounts would be. So just want to clarify that I do want the response in writing to that to be provided to the committee as you had suggested. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jonas. Mr. Kuzmierczak, starting clock, please go ahead, sir.
Mr. Cousineau, I wanted to ask you how long you have been in the federal public service for.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. I think my gray hair reflects that I've been in the public service for 30 years.
For 30 years. So pretty much your entire adult life you've been in the federal public service serving this country. Is that correct, sir?
Give or take, yes, absolutely.
Sir, I wanted to say thank you for your service to this country.